to get to.
Yeah, I think the big thing is that these games are all pretty close in terms of this is the Sweet 16. We got to mention that, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, it's not like we don't have to deal with the 10-point favorites. We don't have to deal with the possible blowout. Well, I mean, there might be a blowout, I guess. There could be blowouts, but according to the odds, there's not going to be a blowout. But so before we get into this first game here, we have three guys who are kind of priced above everyone else. We got Jaquez at 10K. We got Nowell, who we'll be talking about in this game, at 9.4K. Timme, 8.9K. So I think that'll be one of the main talking points. We're going to have to decide if we want to do the stars and scrubs method or if we don't want any of those guys and kind of just sit in the mid-range kind of a thing. So as we get into it. So Markquis Nowell, do you think he's worth it here? 9.4K against Michigan State, who will probably use Hogard, Walker, Akins, use a variety of defenders on him.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it even matters, though? Like Nowell could go 5 of 20 from the floor and still have 10 assists and still get 10 free throws. Do you think it even matters if he doesn't even have a good shooting night?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely solid, and you can't fade a guy like this by any means. I mean, the problem I found with this slate on a whole, though, is there aren't many guys in the 4,000 to 5,000 range that I really feel that good about. So for me, it comes down to, okay, am I going to use Nowell or am I going to use, someone like Jaquez or Timme in the highest over-under slate of the game? So I think in most builds, I've leaned towards Jaquez because using two of them gets very difficult here. You're throwing other guys in this game, like, maybe you're throwing out Cam Carter, or maybe you're throwing out, some of these $4,000 guys that don't really get much usage or have a ton of upside. So that's the cost you have of using Nowell. And I mean, he's a fine pivot play. Just maybe this game it's close enough to hit overtime, and that obviously changes everything. But for now, not really at the top of my list.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing I noticed in the early games is that you kind of want some guy that he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. And if you played like a Nick Smith or a Nolan Hickman in the last rounds, you're watching those games. I mean, I may be speaking personally from experience, but if you have those guys on your team, it's like, well, Nick Smith was kind of benched a little bit, wasn't ready for the moment. Nolan Hickman kind of got overtaken by Rasir Bolton for Gonzaga a little bit, and you're kind of thinking, but with Nowell, you don't even really have to worry about that. And on a Michigan State side, I think the problem with them is that they kind of have a few guys like Tyson Walker has been their closer, but sometimes I think even again in the Marquette game, it was like the first 30 minutes, he wasn't really doing too much. So, I mean, it's not like his upside is going to be that much for 7.2. And then Hogard, when Walker takes over, that kind of takes away Hogard's ability in the final 10 minutes of the game, kind of a thing. So these are just small things you have to think about. And so in the value range, though, you mentioned Cam Carter, 4K.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's nothing exciting there. He's a guy you play because you need to fill your lineups here, but you're looking to get 15 fantasy points out of that, 15, 20, which is reasonable here. But outside of that, I mean, I've tried to look through this matchup. You're going to know the Spartans better than me for sure. But so Kansas State, it's an up-tempo game, right? They're 41 in tempo per KenPom. And you would think that would make some Michigan State guys somewhat attractive here, but you're right. The price it's just up there. Kansas State also 15th best perimeter defense in the country here. So even a guy that's super efficient like Hauser from three, even though it's up here in Badgerland, we kind of refuse to acknowledge the existence of the Hausers. Even someone like that, I don't know if I can really get behind unless I'm going super contrarian. The one guy that's interested me all year long for Michigan State, and part of it has been there's been health issues on and off, but now he's been coming off the bench, and that's Malik Hall at 5,300. If you'd asked me going into the season who one of their best players would have been, I guess I would have guessed that, but he would have needed to take a little bit of a leap there. So Malik Hall has some upside. You mentioned in your March Madness money breakdown that there are some scenarios where he could maybe find himself in the game more with a defensive matchup against Keontae Johnson. So obviously part of it is minutes, but 26 minutes a game isn't too bad. But no, I think Hall he'd be in play for me at least. If I'm looking at some of these Michigan State guys.
I think Hall is kind of a perfect tournament play where he's been getting, I don't know, about 15 points in all these games without much offense. As you mentioned, his injuries are just kind of taken away from his game. I don't think he's made a three in the first couple of tournament games. His shot has just looked off. And the thought is, okay, give him a few days, give him some practice sessions at MSG, some more rest, and maybe this could be. I mean, that's what the fan base has been talking about. Is Malik Hall's offense going to come around at any point? We know he's going to get the minutes.
Yeah,
and
he hasn't been a three since March 4th. He's over his last 8.
Right. So, I mean, if his offense comes around, it could. I mean, we've seen his offense be a factor at times throughout his career. And at 5,300, I mean, you already know you're kind of getting 15 points from rebounds and steals, blocks, whatever.
Yeah, the steals, blocks really help his case.
If you add in 10 to 15 points to that, I think that'll be the upside that you're kind of looking for in that 5,300 range. Because, I mean, if he does go in, it's not like Kansas State plays that big. Like Tomlin's their big guy. Keontae Johnson's only 6'6". I know he's jacked and everything, and he's a little shorter and great boxing now. And they got Masood and Gesson coming off the bench. Yeah. So, but that's just a GPP option I'd be interested in at least.
Yeah. So like with Sissoko, I mean, obviously the game log's a little bit all over the place and he's not really seeing more than 25 minutes in any occasion, but he did have 10 boards against Marquette. I mean, there's the matchup against Tomlin, who's 6'10". Interesting, but probably reserved for GPPs, I'd say.
Yeah, I kind of like Hall over Sissoko just because of that offensive upside I was talking about. Exactly. And Tomlin's a pretty good rim defender where I don't think Iguodaro is that great of a rim protector as compared to Tomlin. So that kind of takes away some of those easy dunks that Sissoko had last game. So Akins is in that range. He's, again, if his shots are falling, he could hit 30 points, but similar to a lot of players in this tournament, their shots aren't falling. So
yeah, exactly. I'm hesitant to, with the ball and the rim and all that talk, I'm having a tough time using these streaky 3-point shooters as, some of my GPP fillers.
So if you're looking in the 7K range, do you like, so we got Hauser, Walker, Hoggard, Johnson, I guess Tomlin's still in there as well. Do you like any of those guys a little more than the others that stand out at least?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Hoggard, but he's been in foul trouble a couple times this tournament, so that's risky. But I mean, Michigan State seems to be a different team when he's on the court, so their best chance of winning this game and advancing to the Elite Eight is with the ball in Hoggard's hands. So I guess he would be the one, but of course, I mean, that's kind of a cop out. He's the most expensive, but yeah, I guess that would be the pick in that tier.
It seems pretty. I might even go to Tomlin because Michigan State's post defense has been so bad this season. If people are watching that USC game, USC had a run of like 5 straight easy layups in their opener. It's just the kind of thing where Carson Cooper's getting minutes for him and not Jackson Kohler because he's at least a little more sound defensively. And Tomlin has had big games for Kansas State. He gets the rebounds, he gets the blocks. And then if you throw in 15 points for Tomlin, he is a guy who could see, 30, 35, 40 fantasy points here. And at only 6,600, I think he kind of makes more sense than the Michigan State guys because they just spread around so many points and so many stats to where Tomlin throwing points with rebounds and blocks, then I think he's also cheaper than all these other guys too. So I think that would be the guy I prefer in that range.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we got for that one. Unless you want to talk about no, that's about it. Steven Izzo, no.
No, we can move on.
Yeah, Arkansas against UConn. This is an interesting matchup because UConn, the main talking point is UConn's size. Sanogo, Klingon going against not a ton of size for Arkansas, and the Mitchell brothers seem to always get in foul trouble. You kind of like Markquis Mitchell. He's 5,900, just a guy that gets into foul trouble, but you got to think that if he doesn't get into foul trouble, he's going to get rebounds and he's, I don't know, going to get points. So what are your thoughts on just the big matchup there with Sanogo and Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, you want to. I would imagine so. Arkansas uses a lot of different starting lineups, right? And Mitchell has been in and out of the starting lineup this year, even this tournament, this month. But I think that he would be the best matchup, the best guy that they have in their kind of rotation of big men to try to contain Sanogo to some degree. So I'm interested in him, even though he wasn't really starting last game. But I mean, you look at this game log; it's the most volatile you can see on the entire slate. I mean, you're going from 37 points, upper 30s, 40s, even, or upper 30s to single digit games. So super boomer bust play, but. I had to find a lot of guys in this salary tier to make this work. So Mitchell is one of the guys that interested me a little bit. The other thing, again, all these Arkansas guys seem like they're super GPP. I had Nick Smith in a build because I'm like, well, he can't continue to be this bad, right? But maybe that is the case. Maybe the moment is too big for the freshman. He's I fall into the trap of like falling in love with these, NBA lottery guys, and Nick Smith certainly has a lot of future potential. Maybe falling out of the lottery around, 10, 12, I think in some mock drafts that I've seen him. But, I think that is upside, but if you don't have the coach's trust and aren't getting the minutes, then, maybe that's not going to work so much. The other thing here we have is, Anthony Black. He's questionable with a foot injury. And, he's been a pretty big rotation piece. He's gotten a lot of the minutes. If he doesn't play, then guys, or even if he does play and isn't 100%, then guys like Ricky Council, who play a similar role, would start to get a lot more interesting. So, that's kind of what I look at it from the Arkansas side.
I think we kind of saw in that Kansas game. It was like Devontae Davis was the guy kind of running things at the end. He fouled out, and then it was Ricky Council's time. And like the other guys weren't even almost like in the consideration to even touch the ball kind of a thing. So that was pretty interesting. So my question here is, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get an answer to it. So Kamani Johnson is 6'7" and 230, started the last couple games. Markquis Mitchell hasn't seen much time the last couple games, but he has a few more inches. He's 6'10" and 240. There's been times where Markquis Mitchell has seen more playing time against bigger teams this season, like Texas A&M, like Kentucky. And you have these guys who could get, 20 minutes because of their size, because they're going to need size against this UConn team. And Johnson's 3,300. Mitchell is, I believe he's the minimum 3,000. So you got these guys who could possibly get, 15 to 20 points. Have you put any thought into going down to the bottom of the barrel and hoping, one of these guys gets some minutes here?
Yeah, I mean, even if they're getting minutes, we know in college basketball that minutes doesn't necessarily lead to fantasy production, and it's going to be tough sledding. It's going to be tough sledding here. So, I mean, if you had to find a punt play, I guess maybe you could throw it with Johnson, but I've got more eggs in Markquis Mitchell, I guess, as far as this goes.
Yeah, the one worrying part, I probably like the Markquis Mitchell game log a little more, but he didn't play against Kansas, and then he only went 3 minutes against Illinois. Again, I don't know if that was because of the matchups. Kansas is a little smaller than UConn, so it's something to keep in mind. But probably if you're looking between those guys, maybe Johnson might be the guy. He'd probably, I'm not sure who he'd actually be matched up on. Caravan, but let me see. Yeah, it'd probably be Johnson against Alex Caravan there. They're probably both playing the 4 spot there. So Sanogo's 7.8K. This is kind of the range we're talking about for the prior game. Do you want to play Sanogo? You probably do, right? I mean, minutes are the worrying thing. 30 minutes or so a game. But what do you think about Sanogo here in terms of this matchup?
Yeah, so he was originally kind of a fade for me, going into the or no, wait, I mixed him up with somebody else thinking he had an injury. But so no, he's been solid so far for UConn. I mean, he is the guy to start the tournament. I mean, he's got 35 and 45 DraftKings points. He's been their best scorer because, the shooters aren't knocking down shots. I was originally thinking about Hawkins at 6K because his price has gone so much and it was like a buy low opportunity. But the way the 3-point shots are falling in this tournament and Arkansas defending the perimeter at a top 25 rate makes me a little bit hesitant to use some of the shooters for UConn here. So I'm rethinking that a little bit. And Sanogo he's the guy. He's in play. I mean, you see that monstrous usage rate. He's doing everything for these guys, and they're gonna win or lose by him. But also, I mean, I kind of looked down the list a little bit. Klingon is very interesting. If I said that right, he's only 4,700. He's probably got the best per minute numbers out of anybody on this whole sheet. But the problem is he's only getting 12 minutes a game, 12, 15 minutes a game. So he's kind of an interesting, pivot or contrarian, if you will. Somebody that could go off if, Sanogo gets a couple quick whistles or something because of all the different big men that Arkansas is throwing at him. So I'm a little bit interested there as well.
Yeah, Klingon, just the thing is that they tried it, I believe, earlier in the season, Sanogo and Klingon playing together, and it just didn't work. It's just too many big bodies there that can't move all that well. So, I mean, just the hope. I mean, playing Klingon is kind of, I guess you're fine with 15 to 20 points, but the hope in tournaments is that Sanogo gets into foul trouble and Klingon is forced to play a little more. So that'd be something you're actually hoping on. You're probably fading Sanogo and using Klingon kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You definitely don't use them both in the same lineup.
One of the reasons I was looking at Sanogo is because Arkansas is one of these defensive teams. They're really physical, and they are, one of the worst in the country. I guess UConn is down there as well, just in terms of free throws attempted compared to field goals attempted. So that means they basically foul a lot, and opponents get to the free throw line a lot. Mm-hmm. Sanogo is a 78% free throw shooter. So that's just another reason to kind of consider Sanogo there.
Yeah.
As for all these other guys, I'd kind of rather play like Ricky Council and Davis based off what we said earlier, just because they seem like the guys who are going to have the balls in their hand. Mm-hmm. Whereas Hawkins and Newton, Caravan, like these guys are just going to be kind of spotting up shooting. Jackson's kind of a do-it-all guy, not really there for offense. And it's just maybe Hawkins lights up from deep. Maybe it's Newton lights up from deep, but it just seems like Council and Davis are a little safer, whereas Nick Smith is just a complete tournament play because everyone's going to look at his last game log and no one's going to play him kind of a thing. So I guess you can just be like, okay, tournaments, let's ride Nick Smith, NBA potential. Let's see what he can do. And then he maybe only get 5 points for you, but maybe he'll get 30. So
yeah, we will have to see.
Yeah. So the other game, Tennessee, Florida Atlantic, probably going to be the ugliest game of these four that we have, likely because Tennessee's involved. They were a bit physical against Duke, I'll say. Florida Atlantic here, I guess I'll start off. Are you looking to play these Florida Atlantic guys? We had Janelle Davis, their best player. He was awesome against Fairleigh Dickinson. But again, Fairleigh Dickinson, he's 7,600. He's basically the same price as Sanogo. So I'm just not seeing it with really any of these Florida Atlantic guys if 50 points is possible for him here.
Yeah, what was the joke? They were going to try to watch Australian rugby or something to get prepared for the Tennessee team. There's a big difference between Fairleigh Dickinson and a team that's been number one in KenPom's efficiency ratings for pretty much the entirety of the year. So I'm really not interested in any of these Florida Atlantic guys. You look statistically, they're pretty much. You mentioned that things are pretty tight in the implied total list. I mean, they're almost like a standard deviation away. In terms of being at the bottom. So they're definitely an outlier. None of those top guys, I can't stomach that salary. Greenlee at 4,100. I mean, what do you look at? You want Greenlee or do you want Chico Carter? These $4,000 guys that don't really interest you a ton. So maybe, but I'm mostly looking at the Tennessee side because we had a pretty nice emergence in the round of 32 for Olivier Kamwa at 6,200. So he's a guy that's in my lineups. Josiah Jordan James has kind of some all around upside here. Vescovi was able to get the three ball going a little bit in the tournament where very few people have been able to do so. So and then you have, of course, after the Ziegler injury, just the rotations just a little bit tighter. Some people like Jonas Idu. I should have looked up that pronunciation. No, 5,000 for Adu. He gets a lot of, he gets those rebound and block dirty work here, but I don't. And maybe they use him more off the bench to combat Golden for Florida Atlantic. But so maybe he's in play. But I think really my lineups have had Kamwa with maybe a little James sprinkled in, and that's kind of how I'm attacking this because the 7,500 tier for Vescovi, I think, just has a few other better options.
It almost feels like pretty much, whereas almost none of the FAU guys are that great of plays, I feel like all of the Tennessee guys could be pretty good plays because they are priced either the same or slightly cheaper. Like Vescovi kind of just is one of those guys I was talking about. He's going to have the ball in his hands on most possessions, and that usually leads to points. I don't know. Some people will look at that first Louisiana game and see that, but I mean, he is their guy who kind of runs things. So that does stand out at 7,500. He does a little bit of everything, and as you said, he's been making shots. So how confident? I mean, I don't know if confidence is the right question here, but he's only 6,200 for Nkamwa. He's going to be popular because of what he did against Duke, but I mean, as you can see in the numbers, he still only played 22 minutes in that game, and he's not going to go 10 of 13 from the field again. So like, what's the expectation there from the 6,200? And he's probably going to be popular because of that Duke game.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, the price has been around this range the entire year. He's been between 6,000 and 7,000. I think he peaked around 6,900. And you're right. The field goal volume was probably a little bit uncharacteristic there. So, but you're hoping for he's got double digit rebounding potential. We've seen that a couple of times this year. So there's that raising the floor without the scoring. Not a ton as far as blocks and steals. Can get a couple assists. So while the field goal volume won't be as high, I think if you mix a few more rebounds and assists in there with a little bit less scoring, you can still have a pretty solid game. And he's been strong this tournament. So he's the type of guy that I think could carry this momentum and potentially start looking at improving his stock for the next level. So I'm fine going with him, and Jordan James, he's struggled a bit with the shot lately. He was kind of banged up later in February and coming back, but he's just got some all around potential here. And Florida Atlantic, you look at them on paper, they're pretty decent. They're a decent team. They obviously made it this far. Mm-hmm. And their defense is 33rd in the country. So you might think offhand that, I should target Tennessee guys because they have the weakest opponent, but not so fast necessarily because, just this game on a whole is projected to be lower scoring. So, the next game, we have a ton to talk about here. This game, there's a few guys that are in play, but we're not quite as confident about.
Yeah, one last question here for Tennessee, just in terms of the bigs. I've been looking probably a little too much into all their numbers and trying to guess who's actually going to get the minutes because you have all these guys that are sitting in the 5K range. So does anyone stand out between Mashik at 4,700, Phillips 5,100, Adu at 5,000? Does anyone stand out in terms of these kind of value Tennessee guys here?
Yeah, I mean, you're really kind of throwing a dart and hoping for the best. Mashik's he's been in the starting lineup since February 15th. He has a 33 DraftKings point day against Kentucky. But also he scored 2 DraftKings points against Duke. So I guess if you're trying to be different, you could throw him in there and as opposed to someone like Idu who had 23.8 against Duke, has started in the past and is coming off the bench, but has been strong. You're kind of taking stabs at it here. I couldn't intelligently tell you which one is the one to play. One of them, of course, will be in play, and I'm just kind of throwing my eggs in Kamwa.
Mm-hmm. So as we see here, 4,700, Klingon and Mashik are both 4,700. Klingon may only play 12 to 15 minutes, and then Mashik could have 30-minute upside here. Is there any preference, or do you just kind of prefer Klingon whenever he's on the court? He's always producing, so you're kind of leaning on that?
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on the rest of the structure of your lineup and whether or not you're using Sonogo and what other Tennessee bigs are fitting in for you here. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I'd probably lean Klingon because even in his low minutes, I think there's a higher floor.
I'm just asking personally because my last utility spot has 47 left in one of my lineups, so I'm having to answer this question myself. So
I've restructured my lineup like 6 times since we started this show, so we'll see how it goes.
And we may have to restructure it again. So I looked at this earlier today. Let's click into David Singleton's status. He hopes to play Thursday. He's still going through treatment. He went through treatment Wednesday. Hopes to play. As we saw, he kind of twisted his ankle at the end of UCLA's game. And you also got Bona there, he'll play, but he's dealing with a shoulder issue. So, I mean, we don't actually think Singleton won't play, but if he's clearly not 100%, I mean, that's the thought is it's going to open time up for Andrews. How do we actually play into this in DFS, or do we just avoid it?
So the weird thing for me is, okay. So the Singleton injury, I mean, you saw that, right? Were you watching that game?
Yeah.
It looked terrible. It looked really, really, really.
It looked like he was done.
I thought it was worse than rolling his ankle. I thought something else might have cracked in there. Who knows? Mick Cronin is always going to be very secretive about this, especially this time of year. Maybe we'll get some Singleton. I'm not counting on much Singleton, and if he is, I don't expect him to be super effective. And also one bad step and he's done for the rest of the game. Bona is interesting because, according to their LA Times reporter Ben Bolt, she's a game time decision. I mean, I'm sure he's going to go out there and play. But so this is very interesting. How I handled this was, just kind of looking at, I don't get quite as interested in Dylan Andrews. We're talking about a freshman who will be out there to hopefully hustle and play good defense, but, not really much of a scoring threat, even with how cheap he is. How I chose to attack this was go to a different freshman in Amari Bailey. Now, the problem here is he's up at 7,000, but ever since Jalen Clark went down, they kind of play a similar position. He hasn't been under 20 DraftKings points since Jalen Clark went down, and he's been 35 or more twice, a couple other 30-pointers in there. So Bailey is the guy that, you're not going to get much more value than that out of 7K. And if Singleton's limited, again, they play that, both of those guys, they'll switch between the 2 and the 3. And even though, there's another strategy to go about this, you might think, okay, I'm going to go with the veterans, right? I'm going to go with Jaquez. I'm going to go with Tiger Campbell, guys that were there when these guys matched up in the Final Four 2 years ago. But Bailey is the guy that his presence is directly correlating, with the absence of some of these injuries, and he's being asked to do a lot more. He's got 6 assists in back-to-back games. So, he's distributing, he's getting steals, and, he's just producing all over the court.
Bailey was in my first couple lineups, and pretty much everything you said. He's a little too cheap. UCLA pretty much only go through Jaquez, Bailey, and Campbell. And I just want to say the Andrews usage percentage is probably just hopefully he'll throw people off, because a lot of times when he comes in, that's when the starters aren't in. That's when he's actually getting minutes. So that usage is probably going to be closer to the 13% that Singleton has, or even lower. So I'd ignore the usage right there. In 3,900, I mean, we just talked about the possible 3K guys even. So Bailey at 7K does seem
Yeah.
like a pretty good deal. And in general, I love playing guys against Gonzaga because their defense, their defense is sure, maybe it's picked up a little bit here later in the season, but they still
Mhm.
play fast and their defense is not that good. So,
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely the game to target here in UCLA, of course, highest implied total on the slate. Slight only because they're slight favorites. This could go either way. I like Gonzaga in this game. I'm a little surprised at UCLA's favorite if we want to talk betting, just because I UCLA is so injured. You talk about Clark already, and I just don't think that Singleton and Bona are as healthy or have as good of a chance to really suit up and be their best, most effective selves as Cronin's maybe somehow led people to believe. They're just too banged up, and Gonzaga's clicking on all cylinders here. So I'm liking that for sure. So also, of course, Jaquez, if you can work him in, great. I'm finding a hard time. Like I said, I part of me is skipping the Nowell, Jaquez, even Timme tier and going down to find more balance here because I feel like that'll be a less popular thing that people look at. So, but any way you cut it, you build your lineup and you don't have at least three pieces from this game, you're probably doing something a little bit wrong because again, close and higher scoring. And yes, UCLA has such a tough defense. That's pretty much their identity, but the bodies that have made that defense so tough are no longer available here. So I'm definitely looking at some Gonzaga guys. I mean, obviously you start at the top. Timme in the Final Four matchup 2 years ago, granted against an entirely different USC or UCLA front court there, he still scored 25 points. He's their most reliable scorer, and they're going to continue to get him the ball in the paint. And what center is UCLA going to defend him with? I mean, Bona, if his shoulders healthy enough to go, he'll take a lot of cracks at it. Kenneth Nwuba, Mackie Tien, these are all guys that Timme should be able to school in the paint. Absolutely. So even a guy like Watson, who you mentioned, he's a very, very good rebounder and could probably get a pretty easy double-double. I'm looking at Timme to score another 20, 25 points or more in this game. So he's definitely in play for me as well. Hickman, you alluded to earlier, 5,300. People are going to see, oh, he's kind of the point guard. And he's the starter, and the production just hasn't been there for me. I'd be more likely to want to roll the dice on a Malachi Smith at 4,300, or even
Bolton.
better, Rasir Bolton is running that point. He seemed to have Markquis trust a little bit more. Rasir Bolton's, he's an upperclassman. I think he's got to be a fifth or sixth year senior at like his third school at this point.
I was going to say eighth year.
Yeah, 8th year. Yeah, a lot of Iowa State and all over the place.
He was at Penn State for a year, which seems like 10 years ago.
Yeah, that seems like forever ago. But anyway, yeah, at 4,600, I think. I would imagine that a lot of people will arrive at the same conclusion and want to play Bolton as well. So that's the only downside there. But he was the easiest kind of plug into lineups for me. Needing guys in that salary tier. So right now I'm looking, my first lineup that I'm messing with here, it's got Bailey and it's got Timme and it's got Bolton. And, I'm seeing what else I can work in from this game as well.
Yeah, I think Bolton is just one of those guys I was talking about earlier who probably going to have the ball in his hands a lot in the final 10 minutes of this game, because that's what happened against TCU. He was the more trusted guy, most trusted guard. And even though his numbers just haven't been there this season because, the minutes just haven't been there, it's clear that there's some more trust here in Bolton's veteran leadership that go into play here. And he's only 4,600. He's right in the when I mentioned the Klingon and Mashik discussion, I will say that Bolton was already in my squad, so he wasn't under discussion, but he's also right in there.
Yeah, you got a guy whose point guard ball handling minutes are increasing for the number one offense in the country going against a banged up defense. The whole picture is there.
Yeah. Now, I wonder how Tiger Campbell, who he actually opens up on. In terms of matchups, we see Strother here at 8,100 and Bailey at 7K. To assume those guys will probably be on each other. I'd rather just, save 1,100 on Bailey in this spot. I think Strother's a little too expensive there. His numbers are pretty juiced up just from, the favorable matchups over on the West Coast. And then I mentioned to you before the show, I'm probably leaning a little more on Watson over Timme just for those 900 savings. Clearly, it depends what you want to do with those savings, but I still think that in most matchups, Watson can get to his numbers. Maybe Timme has a little more scoring upside, but I still think Watson can get there. And if Timme is having some early success, you gotta think UCLA will change up what they're doing. They may, start to double team Timme a little more. That'll open up some looks for Watson. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like Jaquez double teaming Timme kind of a thing. I'm sure Mick Cronin has something up his sleeve to where they're going to confuse Timme and make other guys beat them. So that's one of the reasons. And you're also saving $900 on Watson. So it's kind of why I like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely get behind that too. I think there's a definite matchup to whatever you want to put, whatever Gonzaga front court player you like the best, just because that's the one area where UCLA isn't as deep and they're also banged up.
Yeah, this Matthew Nicholson. Yeah, Nicholson, Northwestern's big. He had 17-9 against them. I just remember him getting so many easy looks in that game. And yes, it was a season high that this big white dude for Northwestern had against UCLA. So if that doesn't sway you to getting at least one Gonzaga big, then I don't know what will. If Matthew Nicholson's doing that against UCLA, what is Timme and Watson going to do? So,
yep, absolutely.
All right,
and
what up?
Watson should be less popular too. Every casual that's jumping into this knows who Drew Timme is, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Watson, not quite as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder what the percentages will be between those two. So, so for just overall strategy here, we talked about every player. Are we more likely to do the stars and scrubs with a Jaquez, with the Timme, with a Nowell, or are you more likely to sit in the 5K range, maybe go up 7K, 8K kind of a thing? What do you think is the best move here?
Yeah, I'm shooting for balance, to be perfectly honest with you here. The lineup I'm about to submit that I was working on as we did this show doesn't have Jaquez, Timme, or Nowell. So, with Watson being my highest priced player, followed by Bailey, and then, really attacking that, obviously you throw Bolton in there, and then I'm really attacking the 6 to 7K tier and hoping for the best here, with my riskiest options being like a Markquis Mitchell. So, we'll see. That's kind of how I'm going with this one. You should definitely, guys like Jaquez seem like they're built to play Gonzaga and I guess should be in play as well. But there's just, on a 16 game slate, there are so many 4 to 4,500 guys you feel good about. That just dries up here because not only obviously there are less teams, but most of these teams have been in the DFS pool all year, and there's not any pricing mistakes, so there's no easy free squares or anything. I mean, Bolton might be the closest that you have to that, but there's just not much there. So I've really struggled to find value. And, while people are going to definitely be attracted to Timme and Jaquez in those types of games, my angle for being a little different is to switch things up and take a more balanced approach. Basically put a cash game lineup in a GPP and,
right.
I'd hope other people try to get too cute with their 4K plays and end up hurting their lineup ceiling because of it.
Right. I did try putting together a stars and scrubs lineup with Nowell and Jaquez because the thought is, okay, you're getting the minimum, let's just say minimum 40 points from both Nowell and Jaquez with the upside as well. So you got that. And then your other 6 spots are a gander. Just say that you can go all the way down to the Arkansas guys we were talking about as well.
Yeah,
but
I mean, you're looking at Johnson in that scenario, and then the Meshick, Kling, that's what the rest of your lineup looks like.
Yeah, you're gonna have to gamble on probably a couple of the cheap Tennessee guys and hope you don't get the one who only gets 5 points. You're gonna have Bolton, like Malik Collins down there. He mentioned just the Tennessee guys. So there's a world in which that lineup works, and you just hit on all of the Tennessee guys. Sanogo gets into foul trouble. You got Klingon. Malik Call has a good offensive game. Bolton, I mean, he'll be popular anyway. So, and then the Arkansas guy you get, he has some success. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that lineup did win the 25K, but it's just a massive guessing game with the Tennessee players. I think it's going to be, there will be people who mass enter who will kind of just like mix up those Tennessee guys, and hopefully they'll get two of them or three of them in one lineup kind of a thing. And that may end up, being the winner kind of a thing. But if you're only doing, a few entries or even one entry into the main contest, it just makes more sense kind of to play a little safer, to where you're not at the risk of Rick Barnes doing something a little different, a little crazy with this lineup, and then also that game being like 50-45 or something because it's Tennessee. So
exactly.
All right, it was less than an hour. We didn't have 16 games, so we only had 4 games, but we made it here. You got any other last thoughts after I think we mentioned every player on all 8 of these teams here.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot more to add. I'm tweaking around and we'll see. I think there's ways to build lineups and minimize your risk to some of this variance. Of course, you involve sacrificing some of those big guys, but the more I go through this and the more I talk it out with you, that's really how I'm going to attack this one.
Yeah, I'll probably listen back over to the show before I finalize all my lineups, just to get all of our original thoughts here, and instead of when it comes to 5 o'clock or something and I'm just like kind of I don't know what happened, I'll just do this, I'll just doing a bunch of stupid stuff. That's usually what happens. But rotowire.com/TRY to get a free 48-hour trial to this advanced lineup page, to all of the pages here, lineup optimizer. And then once you're in there, rotowire.com/chat, we do have a few more days here left of March Madness. We do have a CBB chat if you want to go in there, ask any questions to us. But you can also find Jake at RotoJake on Twitter. I am at Zdroik. Jake, thanks for joining me. Maybe we'll do something for tomorrow. I haven't talked to you about that yet, but I know the prices are out already. We'll
really?
see how I think we have a cheat sheet for it actually, as we can look right now.
In the slates here?
Yeah, we got the
have
prices.
a little something for tomorrow. Maybe we come back later today and put something on. That might actually work best. So
yeah, there we go. So maybe we'll come back Friday. We'll see how big the contests are. Probably not as big, but it is a Friday, so DraftKings may help us out a little bit. We'll see. But Jake, thanks for joining me, and everyone, thanks for watching. Make sure to give a thumbs up on the video, like, and subscribe.